It was a bright morning when the little girl sat at her old wooden piano, her tiny fingers brushing the keys softly. Music had always been her world, a place where she could forget everything else and simply feel. She didn't just play notes. She told stories with every sound, every pause, every gentle touch. Her parents often watched from the doorway, smiling, amazed at how someone so small could create something so big. There was a certain calm in the way she played, like the piano had always known her hands would one day make it sing that morning, though there was something unusual in the air. The house was buzzing with excitement and worry all at once. A large gathering was happening in the city that day, something very important, and the adults were frantically preparing everything. There was a feeling of urgency, a kind of tension that made everyone move faster than usual. The little girl didn't fully understand what was going on, but she could sense it. People were speaking in hushed, hurried tones about someone who had suddenly canceled, and now they needed a performer immediately. When the request finally came to her, she was surprised. "Can you play the piano?" someone asked, their voice slightly anxious. It wasn't just a normal request. The tone made her heart beat faster. This was serious. Very serious. She knew this wasn't just a friendly little recital. The person asking, a very important guest who always seemed serious and busy, needed her help. The weight of the moment made her pause for a second. She looked at her hands, then at the piano, and nodded. She could do this. She must do this. The adults around her exchanged looks of disbelief. "Are you sure she can handle this?" someone whispered. Others shook their heads, worried. How could such a small girl possibly manage to perform under so much pressure? But in the little girl's eyes, there was a quiet determination that no one could ignore. She didn't speak much about nerves or doubts. She simply focused on the music, on the keys, and on the rhythm that had always lived inside her as she prepared. There was a brief moment when she almost wished she could run away. The idea of playing in front of so many people, and someone so important, was terrifying. But then she remembered why she loved music. She remembered the calm she felt every time she pressed the first key, the joy of letting the piano speak through her. That thought brought courage. It reminded her that music wasn't about fear, it was about expression, about sharing a piece of her heart with everyone who would listen. The adults tried to guide her, giving quick tips and instructions, but she had her own rhythm. She took a deep breath and ran her fingers lightly across the keys, feeling the familiar texture of the piano. Every note seemed to respond to her touch, almost like the piano itself was encouraging her. The room grew quieter, everyone holding their breath as they watched her prepare. Even the people rushing around for the event stopped for a moment, drawn in by the gentle aura of focus and emotion surrounding the little girl. There was a strange kind of magic in that pause before she began. It was like the world had slowed down just for her. She imagined the room full of people, the important guest waiting to hear her, and then she pushed those thoughts aside. Music didn't care about appearances or expectations. Music only cared about honesty, about feeling every note as it comes. She let her fingers linger on the first key, took another deep breath, and then the melody started to flow. The tune was soft at first, delicate like morning light spilling through a window. But as she continued, it grew richer, more expressive, carrying the kind of emotion that makes people stop and listen. The adults who had doubted her now leaned in, captivated. It wasn't just skill that shone through, it was purity, honesty, and the way her music reached straight to the heart. The little girl didn't just play notes. She told a story, and everyone could feel it without even knowing the words, even outside the room. Some of the staff paused, catching the faint sound of her playing. A hush fell over the chaos. People realized that something extraordinary was happening, something unexpected. The urgency that had filled the day now blended with awe and admiration. This small girl, who seemed so fragile, was filling the room with power and emotion that could move anyone who listened. She didn't need applause or encouragement. The music itself was her strength. And in that moment before the main performance, everyone knew something special was about to happen. The little girl's heart raced, not with fear, but with excitement. She was ready to face the challenge, to let her music speak louder than words ever could. And so, The stage was set, the keys awaited, and the room full of important faces held its breath, unaware that they were about to witness a moment that would touch the heart of even the busiest, most powerful person in the room. The room was silent now, almost holding its breath. The little girl sat straight at the piano, her fingers hovering just above the keys. Her heart beat fast, but it wasn't fear this time, it was excitement, the kind that made her feel alive and connected to everything around her. The audience of important people, staff, and guests leaned forward slightly in their chairs, curious and anxious. Among them sat the CEO, a person usually composed and serious, observing quietly, expecting a simple performance. But no one knew the magic that was about to unfold. The first notes rang out softly, pure and delicate, like morning light touching the edge of a quiet room. The sound seemed to float, gentle yet clear, and it immediately caught the attention of everyone present. People glanced at each other, surprised at how something so simple could command such presence. The melody grew gradually, each note carefully chosen, each chord carrying emotion that words could never capture. The little girl wasn't thinking about impressing anyone. She was simply telling her story through the piano dot as she continued. The music began to swell, filling the room with warmth and life. The soft shadows of the lights danced on the walls, and the audience could feel the tension of the day melting away. People who had been rushing, talking, and worrying earlier were now completely absorbed, some leaning on their hands, others closing their eyes just to feel the music more deeply. Even the staff working behind the scenes paused to listen, mesmerized by the purity of the performance. The CEO's expression slowly changed. At first, there was the usual composed mask, the professional calm that never seemed to break. But as the melody reached its emotional core, a slight tightening of the chest, a deep breath, and then a glimmer of tears. One note, held just a moment too long, seemed to reach directly to the heart. The little girl didn't notice the impact she was having. She was completely absorbed in her music, her tiny hands dancing over the keys, telling stories of joy, hope, and sincerity. Around her, the audience could hardly hold back their emotions. A mother in the front row quietly dabbed her eyes. A young assistant whispered to a colleague, "I didn't expect this. She's incredible." The atmosphere was surreal. This wasn't just a performance. It was a shared human experience, a moment where everyone present could feel something powerful without speaking a single word. The little girl played with growing confidence. Each phrase she created was more expressive than the last, carrying layers of feeling that no adult could replicate. She had turned the piano into her voice, and her voice was so pure that even the most skeptical listeners were now completely captivated. The room, once filled with anxiety and urgency, was now alive with quiet admiration, hearts softening with every note. The CEO could no longer contain the emotions building inside. A single tear fell, and then another, running down his cheek. He tried to compose himself, but the music was relentless in its honesty, leaving no room for masks or pretenses. The little girl's performance had broken through the barriers of authority, power, and composure. Everyone watching felt it. A little girl sitting at a piano had just reminded them of something profoundly human: beauty, innocence, and emotional truth. The final notes arrived softly, almost like a gentle goodbye. Her fingers lingered over the keys for a heartbeat, then lifted, and the room stayed quiet for a moment longer, as if no one wanted to disturb the lingering magic. Then slowly, a wave of applause began. It started quietly, from one person, and grew into a full chorus of appreciation, clapping, and cheering. The CEO rose from his seat, visibly moved, and made his way toward her. He bent down slightly, meeting her eyes, and smiled, a warm, sincere smile filled with gratitude and awe. "You played beautifully," he said softly. "I've never experienced anything like that in my life. Thank you." His words, simple yet powerful, made the little girl's heart swell. She smiled shyly, her cheeks flushing, feeling a sense of pride and happiness that she had never felt before. This wasn't about fame or recognition or awards. It was about connecting, touching hearts, and sharing something meaningful. In the following moments, the atmosphere was transformed. People who had arrived stressed, hurried, and doubtful were now smiling. Some wiping tears, others shaking their heads in amazement. The little girl's music had done something remarkable. It had created a shared emotional experience that no one present would ever forget. And in that room, for that brief but magical moment, everyone was connected by something simple, beautiful, and human. Later, as people left and the event continued, whispers spread about the young pianist who had stolen the show. Some spoke of her talent, others of the emotions she had stirred. But the little girl didn't care about the attention. She cared about the music, about the story she had told through her hands, and about the way it had touched someone so important. So busy, so serious. And for the CEO, this moment stayed with him long after the music ended. He often recalled the innocence, the honesty, and the courage of a small child who had dared to play under pressure, whose music had reminded him of the power of simple, heartfelt expression. He realized that sometimes the smallest gestures, the simplest melodies, can leave the deepest marks on the heart. The little girl returned home that evening, tired but joyful, her fingers still tingling from the piano. She didn't know she had created a story that would be remembered. All she knew was that she had shared her music, her heart, and a piece of herself. And in doing so, she had proven something extraordinary, that courage, honesty, and pure talent, no matter how small, can move even the hardest hearts, and that sometimes urgency can bring out the most beautiful moments in life.